Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Blackout Hong Kong, which is a 2018 release board game designed by Alexander Pfister and published by Eggert Spiel. This one accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes probably about 90 minutes on average to play, though the box does say 75 to 150 minutes. The idea of the game is that there's been a big blackout in Hong Kong, believe it or not, and we are supposed to be volunteers and specialists trying to help Hong Kong recover from this unexpected change. So there are a number of components here. You've got the main board, which has this map of Hong Kong and this kind of resource wheel here. You've got a bunch of cards that will be your kind of starting hand that look like this. Now obviously these will be not hidden from other players, but everybody does start with the same array. You've got some kind of cards you can draft on the side here, which will come into play a bit later. And more importantly, you've got your own player board. Now a lot of the gameplay does take place on this player board. And I will say these player boards do a good job of talking you through about how the game plays out, because this is quite a systematic game where you go from phase to phase to phase until the game is over. So the breakdown of the game is quite simple, but as I said, there are quite a few different things to go through, and there is a bit of a specific setup for each player before the game begins. So you've got a few cards already placed out onto the board, and you've got a few in your hospital here. These are cards that can be unlocked a bit later. You've also got a few cards here again, and a few more powerful volunteers than the ones in your starting hand that you can again potentially pay for to unlock. There's also an emergency plan. These are kind of objectives that you're working through or trying to work on to get points and money throughout the game. And you've also got these 2 kind of unlockable spots here, which can potentially allow you a 4th card slot to play cards into, or give you a bit more flexibility in terms of having a bigger hand size. And I'll talk through those in a bit. So the breakdown of the gameplay is going to be quite simple. So the first phase of the game is where you're going to roll these dice and allocate them onto their allocated spaces. So you've got all these different resources. You've got medicine, you've got food, you've got tools, petrol, I don't know what that one is, and you've got books as well, or knowledge. And so whenever you roll these dice, you're going to allocate them on their specific spots. And after you've done that, you are going to, out of your starting hand, or whatever cards you've accumulated throughout the game, you're going to allocate them 1 each on these spots here. And as I said, you've got the potential for unlocking a 4th spot later in the game if you pay for it using this criteria here. So let's say, for example, I chose, let's say my doctor here. I put these face down. I choose my, let's see, my blue one here. And let's just say, for example, I chose my, let's say I choose this mechanic here like this. So once everybody's allocated them on their spots here, they're going to reveal them together like so. And then you can choose to kind of activate their powers in any order. So the way these simple ones are going to work, these volunteers with the cubes on, is going to be you are going to allocate one of your resource cubes, like so, onto the matching spot with the blue dice. So, for example, here I would put one of my white cubes where the medicine is, because that's what the blue die is currently showing. Now, there is potential for a bit of mitigation here by spending these van tokens, where you can choose to kind of traverse around the wheel either way to change the resources that you're getting. So if I spent 1 van, I can maybe get one of these. If I spent 2, or in fact this is quite an easy setup for just spending 1, but if I spent 1 I can go here, here or here. But let's say I took a medicine in this example. And now, for example, I've got a medicine resource. I could choose to activate my doctor. Now my doctor says that I can pay 1 medicine. So what I'll do is I'll take my resource cube that I've just put on there back off in order to unlock someone from the hospital. So these cards that have been pre-allocated to my hospital spot, I can actually choose to pay for them in order to get out of the hospital and straight into my hand. So for example, let's say I took my leader into my hand like so. And the leaders are good because they let you take these other powerful abilities, which I'll explain in a bit, and also give you wild resources, because batteries here in the center are going to be wild resources, and you do actually start the game with one of those. And whenever I take my doctor action, I'm also going to get 3 points, or the points depending on the card value. You've also got other cards here, such as your mechanic, where you can get money, 3 coins, or if you trade in a tools resource, you're going to get an additional 3 coins. You've got your scout here, where you can trade in fuel or knowledge in order to get these GRS tokens, which help you scout later in the game, which I'll talk through in a bit, and so on. So that's the basic kind of actions you're going to play in order to activate your actual volunteers and specialists. Now, once that bit's done, you are going to go on to phase 3, which is the objectives phase. Now, this is where you're going to start cashing in your different resources and things in order to unlock either further volunteers. So, for example, here, if I cash in one of these, I would draw this card into my hand, ready to be used going forward. And additionally, I would get to deploy one of my resource cubes onto one of these blue diamonds here. So I'd actually start the game with one on the board. But let's say I start here because my mission on my card is to go from C to C. So at the end of the game, throughout the game, I'm going to get more points if I go from C to C here by connecting the route. But as I said, when I drew that card, it would allow me to place a cube on these blue diamonds. And normally I'd have to go from or add on to a region that's connecting to an existing cube. But because this one doesn't connect to one of these diamonds directly, then again, I can spend one of my van tokens in order to skip a spot and maybe put it on there like that. And surrounding these regions is going to be important for getting points based on this criteria here. So depending on the size of the region, for example, this one here has got 1, 2, 3, 4. In order to surround this section here, if I did so, I would get 5 points. All the way up to a 7 region, which would get me 14 points. Additionally, you can always choose to contribute to your emergency plan by getting these tokens, by scouting, again, which I'll talk about in a bit, or by having a certain array of cards in a specific column. So, for example, if I had 2 purple cards, a yellow card, and a red card in a single column, then I will unlock that ability of getting 5 coins. And whenever I complete the whole criteria of the card, I would get to deploy one of my resource cubes anywhere on the map, obviously restricted to those placement rules, and then take this card and put it above my board, meaning I've got an almost permanent power throughout the game where I can choose to spend these fuel into points at certain spots in the game. So that's going to be how the objectives are going to play out. Now, then you go on to the scout action, and the scout action is probably one of the only parts of the game that's maybe not so intuitive. So in order to scout somewhere, you are going to look at a region where you've got a cube in and look at one of those adjacent regions. So say, for example, here I've got a cube here, so I can actually look in this region, or this region. I would reveal these secretly, hidden from the other players. And these little tokens display different information. So you've got a certain amount of navigation that you need to get this reward. And in order to do that, you are going to basically nominate a number of cards in your hand to try and match that criteria. So all your different cards here, apart from the medic, have a scouting value. So this one's got a value of 2, 1, 1, 1, and so on. And then you're going to basically choose any of those cards to try and match that value. And if you match it or exceed it, then you're going to get the reward. So if I matched 5, I'd get 2 medikits. If I matched 10, I'd get 3 medikits and 2 points, and so on. And the reason you want to do that is not only because at the end of the game, for each different symbol you have, you're going to get points based again on this chart here, but also you are trying to fulfill the objective of your emergency plan, because the first part here is to get one of those navigation tokens in terms of getting points as a reward or getting tools as an award. And everybody's is different. And whenever you do choose to match that criteria, you're going to pick one of the cards that you've dedicated to it, shuffle them up, and then send one of them to the hospital at random. So, just because you got someone out of the hospital doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stay out of the hospital. And additionally, if you ever choose to take a duplicate throughout the game, so say for example I end up getting this one here, if I ever take another one with a medikit on, if I can find one, for example, typical I can't find one, there you go for here, I can never have 2 of the same ones on show, although they're slightly different, they're still ones that offer medikits as rewards. I would actually put these face down, meaning that whenever I scout from now on, I would get an additional scouting point just piggybacked onto my other abilities. So just focusing on different ones isn't necessarily always the best thing to do, because if you focus on the same ones, you get more potential for scouting. And again, once you've taken one of these, they'll go face up, but if you choose not to, they will revert to being face down. So that's going to be how the scouting is going to work. And again, everybody's going to go around these in player order to do so. And then you've got the ability to buy new objectives and new volunteers or specialists. And you do that based on these cards to the side of the board here. So there's always going to be, there's going to start with 3 available in each of these rows. And you're going to spend either 4 coins, 3 coins, or 2 coins, depending on how many there are in that row. So if there's 3 in a row, you're going to pay 4 coins per card. If there's 2 in a row, you can spend 3. And if there's only 1 in a row, you spend 2. And these offer further objectives. So, for example here, if you cash in 7 money and have 2 purple cards and a yellow card in a row, then you get to add this to the checkpoint here, which means that whenever you take one of these checkpoint powers, you'll get 3 coins. And additionally, you'll get a 1 point bonus and get to deploy anywhere on the board. Again, depending on those research criteria. Some of the cards have a number of abilities here, and you can either choose to complete all the criteria, and if you do, you get an additional 5 points, but you can choose to kind of pay it out early by just having one of the criteria, just so you can put it on this checkpoint bonus. So it's one of those things where you can kind of go all in and try to get all the bonuses and the bonus, or all the kind of criteria and the bonus, or kind of just maybe look at it as in going for the checkpoint award. You've got additional volunteers here, which can get you 3 resources at a time, and again offer you more points at the end of the game based on the value of the cards, and so on. So as the game goes on, you are actually going to get more powerful volunteers, new objectives to go for, and so on, to keep the game ticking along. Once that's done, you're going to clean up all the parts of the board. So all the right-hand side of all the cards are going to get replaced. Going to get wiped off, and if there's ever no cards in a column, then they're going to get replenished. Every food resource you've got converts into 2 coins. Every water converts into 1 coin. Or if you've got 2 water, you can spend them in to get a navigation token, which can be used to boost your scouting ability. Now, as I said, the food and the water you've got to be wary of because of that reason, because they are actually perishable. So you can't just piggyback or try to just completely stockpile on food and water, because it's just going to end up going to waste. After that, you are going to do the secure districts action, which, as I mentioned earlier, if you've surrounded a region, you get to choose to basically cash it in and get the points based on the chart. But you'd also get to pick up one of these houses from here, which correspond to that checkpoint action I was talking about, where I could take one of these houses and put it in the region that I've surrounded. So let's say, for example, I did have this one surrounded. I put my house in the center here, which means that nobody else can go there. But it also means that I've unlocked this slot here, which means that when it goes to the next phase, the refresh hand phase, if I have 4 or fewer cards, I can choose to take one of these rows or one of these columns of cards back into my hand, which sometimes you will want to do, but sometimes you won't, because you'll be looking at the criteria of certain cards which you want to go for. And again, if you choose to take a column of cards back, you get to choose one of these checkpoint actions that might not only just be on the board, but they could also be ones that you've gained through abilities of objective cards. And that's going to be how the game's going to play until the deck of cards is going to deplete based on the number of players. So it's actually a pretty simple game once you go through it formulaically. But there's a lot of different things to go for. A lot of these objectives are pushing you in different directions. You can choose to do these objectives here to make your engine a little bit better in terms of paying 10 coins and having 2 purple cards and 2 yellow cards in order to get 10 points and to unlock your 4th slot, which will give you more flexibility because you've got another slot to play cards on, and ultimately will get you more resources and things. Or you can choose to spend 4 of the same resource, 2 blue cards, 2 red cards, in order to get 10 points and to increase your refresh limit to 6 cards, which means that you can actually choose to start taking columns back, not only when you have 4 cards or fewer, but when you have 6 cards or fewer. So that's going to be how the game's going to play. So let's talk about how I feel about the game. So in terms of meaningful decisions, there's actually quite a lot to go for here. Now, do you want to try and maybe go for the big juicy regions here in terms of getting these almost like set collection bonuses? Or do you want to maybe go of a more objective-based kind of pathway in terms of getting your objectives done here, or getting other missions done and so on? So there's quite a few little contrasting abilities there. You can really choose to build up your engine and get those bonuses here, which not only get you 10 points, but will increase your options going forward and make you a bit more versatile as a player. Or are you going to really focus on getting the resources in terms of getting better staff members? Because the more powerful staff members, or volunteers that you accrue throughout the game, are going to be worth points at the end of the game, as long as they're not in the hospital. So it's important that you keep your people at the hospital, and you can't really choose to constantly sacrifice them. And of course, sacrificing them to the hospital is probably going to be, it's going to happen because you're going to want to scout at some points in the game in order to get the different tokens and stuff, and so on. And of course, you've always got your doctor as an option in order to try and get them back. But apart from all the strategic things as well, you've also got the way you're actually going to play the cards into these different columns, because you can use them to get the objectives and things, but you also want to be aware that you want to put things in order so that when you take a hand of cards back, you've got what you need to go forward in the game and progress. So you can't just play them on any row or column, as without thought, because you're probably going to bite yourself in the ass if you do so. So I do like all the different decisions that go on here. There's quite a few things you want to focus on. Resources are pretty limited, meaning that you're going to have to probably get those more powerful volunteers so you can get more resources per turn. You're going to be worried about how you're going to use these van tokens, because you are given a limited amount at the start of the game, and using them kind of willy-nilly isn't going to help you. So yeah, there are a lot of things to think about and so on. So meaningful decision-wise is certainly a strong game for that. The balance of the game as well, all these different paths you can take are more than fair in terms of the points they're going to give you. I don't really see a runaway strategy. So yeah, I think it's a more than fairly balanced game. The mechanics, or the way the game flows and the different things that go on in the game, I think it is good. I mean, I think initially it's going to be a bit choppy in terms of learning phase by phase by phase, but when you break it down, a lot of these are pretty simple in terms of just roll the dice and plan your cards, then actually use the cards, dedicate your resources to the different objectives and so on. So while it's still a bit phase orientated and said a bit stop and start, it actually, in their own right, all the different phases are pretty simple. I do quite like this little resource world. I like how that works, and again, you've got the manipulation of using those van tokens to, if you want particular resources, you can do so. And also the die values, or the faces on the die, are actually disproportionate. So the medicine is quite rare. So if you do happen to roll a medicine, you might want to kind of stockpile on that and try to get it while you can, and divert your plan in an almost tactical way based on the resources available. And the same thing applies to these here. So again, if there's something you particularly want, you might have to divert your strategy to get a particularly good tactical card at that moment. I do like the vast kind of spread of the different objectives you can get. They do kind of make you do lots of interesting things, as I said, in terms of connecting region to region. I like the idea of having to spend cards in rows and columns and having certain colours to make those objectives. And of course, you're trying to get all the different scout tokens to get the whole sets, to get those, a big chunk of 14 points at the end of the game. The time investment of the game, I think it works about right. As I said, I think the 150 minutes it says on the board is a bit of a stretch. I can't really see the game taking that long. And yeah, I think it would be a pretty slow game and a bunch of slow players for it to drag on that long. I think it's a pretty standard Euro timestamp of about 90 minutes. The uptime as well, because the phases are quite quick in the way they play, and some of them you can play simultaneously, I don't really see much scope for being bogged down and waiting for other players to take their turn. It always feels like you're doing something. Maybe the scouting part of the game feels a little bit isolated in terms of letting other people do their thing while you sit back and do nothing. But at the same time, I suppose there's a bit of turn angst there, where if there's a particular token you want and someone's taken it, then you've got to sit there idly and just hope they don't take the one you want. The replayability, I think, is good in this game. There's a lot of different objectives. There's a lot of different cards, different emergency plans you're starting with. So yeah, I think replayability is pretty strong. And interaction-wise, there's not a whole bunch of interaction. I suppose there's some scarcity in terms of surrounding the regions. And interestingly enough, when, say, I surrounded this region and another player had maybe got 2 of those 4 criteria, I would get the full points and get to put my house down, but the other players would still get their points based on how many buildings they have around that section. So you're not going to get completely shut out of the game, and all that investment isn't going to go to waste if somebody closes it off before you get the chance to. So I do actually like that element of player interaction, and it's not an all or nothing kind of vibe. So yeah, in terms of player interaction, it's absolutely fine. There's some passive player interaction with some small gains by doing things quicker than others. Of course, there's scarcity of certain volunteers and objectives that are available, so that's going to be somewhat important as well. The aesthetics of the game is something I personally like. I think a lot of people aren't going to like the black and white vibe. It's fitting of the theme and the game itself, because it's about a blackout. But it's a very dark looking game. I think it gives it somewhat of a unique vibe. I don't mind the way these almost vibrant colours are sitting on the blackboard. I think it looks quite cool. I like the artwork of the cards. It's almost black and white with a tinge of colour on them. I think it looks cool. I think it's got a different vibe. And if just by looking at this game at a glance, you can tell what it is, which I think is a good thing to kind of diversify itself and stand out from the crowd. The component quality as well is more than up to scratch. I mean, all the player boards are good quality. The board's decent. The cards are absolutely fine quality. Not the best of the best, but certainly no issue here. And if I didn't have to comment on the components, it wouldn't even cross my mind, because they're more than up to scratch. The theme as well, it's more of a skin. I mean, it's not a thematic game, but it's fine. I like the different approach it's taken, and it certainly is a new ground, and I can't think of any other game about having a blackout. So at least that's commendable, at least, to go for something a bit different. And the setup and teardown time is not much of an issue. Yeah, you've got a bunch of cards everywhere, but the setup is the same for every player. Just deal some different starting cards out each, deal everyone out one of these emergency plans. And I suppose the biggest bugbear is putting all these different navigation or scouting tokens out, because you put 3 on each region, which is a bit fiddly, but nothing too onerous. The progression is nice, because you are constantly getting better cards into your hand, going for these new objectives and getting more money and stuff. So the game does tick along nicely and has a nice upward kind of incline in terms of the gameplay. And scalability as well. You can play this perfectly fine at any player count. I can't really see an issue, and it's one of those games where if you do solely play at 2 players, you're going to get the absolute full experience of the game without having to sacrifice anything. The comparison-wise, this does feel like a Pfister game. I mean, if you do like Alexander Pfister designs, this one does have some of those kind of signature trademarks that he's known for. Particularly this little card thing here. I mean, I like the way that he makes you play cards in certain ways in certain slots. This reminds me of Mombasa, where when you play your cards and you have to take a column at the end of the round, whatever. So that one's very synonymous of Mombasa. But other than that, it's got a real vibe of a Pfister game, but still has some quite different things here in terms of the resource wheel, in terms of the almost area control of controlling the regions. The card draft is a little bit different, and so on. So in terms of that, is quite, it's synonymous with a Pfister, but it's different enough to stand in its own regard. So yeah, overall, this was a really nice game for me. I completely enjoyed it. As I said, I was a bit concerned about it being so choppy in terms of breaking down in the different phases, but it actually does end up flowing really nicely. The hand management is good in terms of playing them in the different rows. I like the different investments you can make. And so on. So there are lots of interesting decisions here. The idea when you're traveling or scouting these different regions, the fact that you're going to have to sacrifice one of your cards at random, that can be a bit of a tense moment and can offer some frustrating but in a good way moments where you might use your leader because he's got the best navigation, but end up losing him as soon as he gets out of the hospital. So that's really cool. Obviously, you want to have everyone out of the hospital at the end of the game because you want all the points available on the characters themselves. You want to get all the different tokens, which is something to go for. But at the same time, as I said, going for the same tokens is going to be good because it's going to increase your navigation ability. Having these navigation tokens is extremely useful because they really do bolster your potential to scout the highest things, which get you great rewards. For example, here the 16 one would get you 4 books and 6 points, which can be really significant. So lots of different things you can focus on and increase your potential to do things depending on the different routes you want to go down. But yeah, overall a really nice game that came together well for me. I said just a pleasant experience, and certainly another Pfister game that holds itself strong, and just a testament to what a great designer he is. No complaints whatsoever. Happily play this one anytime, and yeah, if it appeals to you and you like your Pfister games, this is another one of his catalogue that isn't going to let you down. I understand that people aren't so keen on this one compared to a lot of the others, but maybe because it's that step down in terms of its weight and complexity. It's not your Great Western Trails, it's not your Maracaibos, but still, it's still certainly a mid-weight Euro game that's a lot of fun to play. So that concludes my thoughts on Blackout Hong Kong. It certainly gets my seal of quality. It's certainly going to stay in my collection as well. So if you have enjoyed the review, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. Additionally, you can support me by backing me on Patreon or follow me on Instagram, and I'll leave the links below for those. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.